Here we are, we're going to plant a tree today, so that's the main practical. And so what we're going to do is, I've got a birch tree here. We're going to have a look at it. Imagine that it's come into the nursery and you're just checking it to make sure that it's okay. And first of all, any dead, dying, diseased wood, that's something that we'd need to deal with. Get rid of any dead first, then diseased and dying or damaged, anything like this will be pruned off with a bit of formative pruning later. But some of the big things you're looking for, has it got a good root to shoot ratio? Now if it's got good roots, this one has got lots of good capillary roots, so that's really good. So you want to inspect it to make sure you've got some good roots on it, not normally as big as this. They can be quite small when they come in from the nursery. Is it healthy? Is it labelled correctly? In this case, has it got a good central leader? That might be important, particularly for a street tree or something like that. And then of course, at about 1 metre high, that's where they are graded on which specification there are. So looking at this one, at 1 metre high, I can put a caliper around. So on this caliper, it's saying it's about 6 centimetres in terms of girth, and so that would be graded as a light standard. So you've got light standard 6 to 8, 8 to 10 would be a standard, and then you move into select standard 10 to 12, heavy standard 12 to 14, and so on. It goes to extra heavy, and then you're into semi-mature trees. So that's some of the specifications with trees. So make sure you've got a good tree to start off with. I'm putting it in a bag. It's important to keep the roots nice and shielded from the wind so they don't dry out. So I'm going to always keep it in there when I'm not using it. So the first thing I'm going to do is just remove a couple of weeds. As you can see, there's a little bit of creeping buttercup in here, so we'll get that creeping buttercup out. We'll just knock that out of the way. We'll put that to one side. One or two, a little bit of gallium up around, a little bit of cleavers that's in there. We'll put that to one side, and now we can dig over the area. We're ready to start. So what I do is I place the tree in the area. Obviously in the selection of the tree, you're going to be looking at things. You're going to be looking at the soil type. Is it the right tree for the soil type? Has it got the right aesthetics? Does it look right in the situation? It could be it requires more moisture or a drier environment. So I'm going to place that just on there. I'm also thinking about where my stake is going to go, because I want the stake, in this case, I'm going to put it on the windward side, which in the UK is from the southwest. As you move up towards round to Lancashire rather, you're looking more, comes round to the west a bit more. So I'm going to look for a little gap. There is a little bit of a gap there actually in the root, so, and that's my southwest side, so I'm going to put the stake on that side. I'm going for a straight short stake in this case, not the sort of angled 45-degree stake. So I'm going to put that there, just going to rest it, and I'm going to score around it. So what I'm going to do here is just to sort of mark out, giving it about 75 to 100 mil, probably at least 100 mil. I'm going to do a circle. I know a lot of people would say, why not you do a rectangle or a square, which is obviously good. It might help to stop the roots coiling a little bit, but I'm just gonna do a circle for now. So about 3 to 4 inches, 75 to 100 mil bigger than the roots of the trees. Remembering that I'm going to get my stake in there where there's a nice little gap there to pop my stake on the southwest side. So now I've done that, I'm going to pop it back in the bag. I can see that I'm going to need at least a good spit depth and a bit more to get to the mark where it was planted in the nursery. So let's do that and pop it back in the bag. Okay, and away we go. So we'll dig out a piece. So I'm going to put the topsoil over to one side. Okay, so just separate your topsoil, pop that over to one side. You can see that this one's had a bit of organic matter, it's had a bit of peat already worked into it, so It's in pretty good condition, so we don't really need to ameliorate the soil, so that's going to be good. And we'll see how far it takes to get through the vegetable topsoil down to the subsoil, and we'll look how we deal with that. You can see that's coming out there quite well. It's a tiny bit of subsoil, but I'm not really worried about that, because it's going to mix in with the top. So I'm going down through the topsoil, separate that all up there. There's quite a lot of worm activity where the worms have been working the peat and leaf mould down into the soil, so they're doing a good job. So we'll just pop that up there. And then what we're going to do is, while we're digging, it's very important to keep digging straight. It's a tendency for people to cone in a little bit, so you want to make sure that you've really dug it out properly and that you don't end up not being able to get the roots in when you get a little bit further down. So now I've got down to roughly my spit depth. You can put a piece of wood across just to check you're at the right depth, but we'll just, for the moment, I'm going to fork the base over. It's very important that you've got good drainage, because that's one of the big killers of trees, is when they get waterlogged, there's no oxygen, the plant can't respond, can't produce energy, so it dies. And another reason is drying out, and that's why we've got it wrapped up. We've made sure that the sides of the hole are nice and straight and not coned, because otherwise we might not get the roots in. So we'll just have a little check to see how we're getting on with the tree. See if we've got the right depth. So remember, the hole, we're putting the stake on this side, on the southwest side. That's the prevailing wind side. So looking at this, it looks like if I put a straight edge across, I'm just going to use my stake. It's actually not far off there. That looks pretty good. So I think if I just cone the middle up a little bit, that'll just help. And we'll see how that goes. I'll put my stake back. We'll pop that back in there. Wrap it up. That's all nice and wrapped and covered. Now what we do now with a lot of bare rooted trees, we normally would just pull the soil into the middle a little bit to cone it, because they've got a natural coning in the roots, so it means there's a bit of soil underneath that central portion. In my case, I don't really necessarily need to do that because it's actually quite full of soil. So what I'm going to do is to just drop that in there. Now I'm working on my own today, so what I'm going to do is to put the stake in. That's going to provide a little bit of extra help in terms of a second person to just so I can actually attach it to. So I'm going to put the tree in there. I'm going to pop the stake just to locate it exactly. So I'm going to put the stake in there so I know the roots are nicely situated in the hole as well. So if I put the stake in there, that will be all right. Now this stake is too big really, which it really wants to end up being about that height, about a third or a quarter of the height of the tree, because then the tree will rely on its own roots. As it moves, the roots will grow out. So this stake will be too big, so really it will want cutting off at the end. I could cut it now, but we'll cut that off later on. Okay, so we'll pop that back in the bag. Now if you're working in twos, you can, if you want to get someone to hold the stake, just pop the fork over the top and then someone else can knock it in, just a bit safer. You can if you're using, so that's if you're using a maul, or you can use a drive awl. You can pop that over and drive it in. Just try and get it so that it's nice and vertical and upright. So we'll just bang that stake in just to get that nice and firm. Okay, so that actually will probably be firm enough for now. Nice and firm, nice and solid. So now what I'll do is we'll get the tree, I'll locate that little break in the roots, hook it round there, so that's sitting in there quite nicely. The roots are there. I can also score the sides of the hole so that the roots don't coil round, that they'll grow through. Otherwise, sometimes if you do a circular hole, you're making a big clay pot and they'll go round and round. So that's all nice and set up now. What I'm going to do, I'm going to get a little bit of help by using my spacer as another pair of hands. Now I'm going to end up with the stake being about this high. So what I'm going to do, I fed the, I'm going to just pop the tie on. So what I want to do is to just put the tie through the spacer, around the back of where I want to tie it, pop that through, just so that we've got it through the spacer. So just so you can see that, we'll just pull that through a little bit. Okay, like that. That's nice, ties nice and round there. I'm just going to feed that through a little bit more. So here I am, I can do that. There's various ways of doing it, but I can pop that now through there. Okay, pull that nice and tight. Okay, pull it nice and tight. And then I can just lever that back, pop it through, and now I've got myself another pair of hands. If it's a little bit tight or the tree isn't, I can maneuver that a little bit just to get that branch away from rubbing against the stake, and I can tuck that in or just do a nail and not knock it all the way home, just so I can get it out to slacken it later. Okay, so now I've got that, I've got my extra pair of hands. I'm now going to put a little bit of topsoil around the roots. You want some nice soil. Now if I had have run into subsoil, what you can do is have a separate heap for your subsoil and then mix a bit of topsoil with it. So I'm going to put a few, give that a bit of a shake, make sure that the soil is going right around those roots, and then what we'll do, we'll chuck a bit more in. Now at this stage, now I've put about 75 to 100 mil, I can now really get in there and firm that in. Obviously if the soil was waterlogged or or certainly very wet, I may not firm it quite as much, but I can really get in there. Use your heel. You don't want any air pockets that are going to fill with water and then freeze, so that's coming in on firm. And then we'll just keep doing that right till we get to the top of the hole. So I'm just popping that in. Nip round the back. Pop those in. Okay, nice. Filling up that hole. Okay, we'll just pull that in, nearly there. There we go. A little bit more, make sure we firm again. A nice lot of, so we'll just make sure, not more than normally about 100 mil, just so you enabled you to get that nice and firm, and then we'll pop that in. Just work our way to the top there, tiny bit more. There you go. Making sure that the roots are all covered, and you're back to the soil mark in the nursery. Okay. There we are, nice and firm. We can always make this a bit decorative, put a circle with a piece of string and work it round with your spade to make that look nice. But the tree's planted. You've got to do a little bit of pruning of any dead, diseased, damaged. It's a little bit over the back there, that'll just want pruning off. And we do a little bit of formative pruning to try and form the shape of the tree, because if you don't do your pruning now, you might end up with a bigger problem later, a branch you've got to move or something like that. Okay, we've just cut it down because again we want a short stake so that the tree, when the wind moves, as it blows round, the roots will compensate and grow out sideways rather than rely on the stake. If it relies on the stake, and then the stake will rot, and then when you pull it out, the roots won't have grown out enough. So we've got to be a little bit cruel to be kind. So that's why we have the short stake. Then you get this nice A-frame, so it grows thicker at the base and tapers to the top. So having the stake is good. We want the tie really up a little bit to make use of the bit of stake we've got. We then put the rabbit guard on. So really we sort of need to just hook it round the tree like that, and then we can kind of wrap it through as best we can. Okay, just wrap that round, keep that going, keep feeding that through. It's a little bit awkward once you've got the stake, to be honest, but we'll do what we can. Now we want to get this as high as we can, because rabbits of course can certainly chew through, certainly well up to about 50, 54, and if it's snowy of course, the snow's up here, the rabbits can get there. So what I need to do is just perhaps push that right round the stem, make sure that we're really well and truly covered there, so we've got good protection. So there's a tiny bit of pruning, dead branch there. Fork the base over, make it look nice, and then of course you want to consider a mulch, about 3 inches of you know, some nice rotted bark. Keep it away from the crown so you don't get crown rot, so keep it away from the bark of the tree. And then of course in the first couple of years it's all about watering, important, checking for pests and diseases, and that's all we can do. Now every spring we'll need to slacken it off because you can ring bark your tree, so you want to slacken the tie off each spring, and when the post is rotten, that's about the time where you don't need the tie anymore, and the tree should have rooted then, usually, you know, a few years, and then the tree's away. Okay, you might want to look at the balance of the tree as well. If you felt it was unbalanced, you might remove a branch. If you've got grass, you might want to raise the crown a little bit for mowing. Okay. Okay.
Like I said, I will. I should probably wait for